I was recently digging around in my garage, and I happened to pull out of mothballs my very first computer, which was an Atari 800. And I plugged it in, and damned if the thing didn't start right up. This is your opportunity to come walking down memory lane with me. Why am I so sweaty and glistening? I'm one of those creepy older guys that you want to kind of watch out for, you know? And we often do tend to glisten with perspiration, lubricant, God knows what it is. Anyway, the point is, I believe it was 1982, maybe 1983, thereabouts, that Atari unveiled their 800. So when the Atari 800 was introduced in the early 1980s, it was the big brother to the Atari 400. And back in those days, back when the American dollar was actually worth something, the Atari 400, generally it was thought, was called the 400 because it retailed for about $400, and the 800, I believe, had a suggested retail price of about $800. By the time my mom and or parents got me mine, I believe the price had come down considerably. I think the 800 pretty soon was selling for something in the neighborhood of $600, which again was a tremendous amount of money in 1982 or 83. The Motorola processor inside this thing is the same Motorola processor that was at the heart of the original Apple II. And surprisingly enough, I recently learned that it is the same processor that was found in the original Atari VCS, which is really quite surprising because the VCS was such a piece of shit compared to this thing. I mean, the Atari VCS, you know, if there was one thing it was known for, it was awful graphics and crappy games that, well, I shouldn't say that. Some people love the VCS, grew up on it, whatever. You young people probably are accustomed to referring to Pac-Man's enemies as ghosts. That is one part of the legacy of how crappy the Atari 2600 VCS was. The monsters that originally chased Pac-Man around in the arcade were referred to as monsters way back when. When Atari released the Pac-Man cartridge, the home adaptation of Pac-Man, they discovered that their 2600 VCS, you know, video computer system, had so little horsepower that basically they couldn't display 4 monsters on the screen at the same time. So they worked out this little gimmick where you'd have a monster flashing on here and another one flashing here. Basically, it had to alternate. It could only draw one monster at a time, so the computer had to take turns displaying each monster in the position it was supposed to be in, and this caused a very noticeable flickering effect. It looked as if the monsters were almost transparent. So somebody at Atari got the bright idea to refer to them as ghosts, as if this transparent flickering technical limitation was somehow intentional. You know, they're not monsters, they're ghosts. That's why they're transparent. It's not that our system was archaic and stone-aged even when we released it. They're ghosts. So overnight, everybody that played video games started referring to them as ghosts, and that always pissed me off. I was a very opinionated little 12, 13-year-old gaming bastard. I, you know, like most 12 or 13-year-old boys, I was capable of getting pretty emotional about video games. Anyway, that's a little aside. The point is, that's how crappy the Atari VCS was. The Atari 800, on the other hand, had some serious graphics hardware. Same 6502A Motorola processor, which I believe ran at about under 2 megahertz. Yeah, not gigahertz, megahertz. 1 point something megahertz. This is what sold the Atari 800. You'd go to a place like, I don't know, Sears or Montgomery Ward or various other places, there were a lot of independent computer stores back in those days. You go to those places, they had one of these up and running on the showroom floor. If you were lucky and you weren't annoying, the salesperson might even let you grab a hold of the joystick and play the game. It was so similar to the arcade game that basically, if you were a kid my age, you knew that you had to get an Atari 800. I think I can get away with the fact that I unplugged the controller and plugged it back in. 1982-83 hot swappable technology. Let's see if it works, shall we? Oh, I hope it is. It's working. Turn it up a bit so you can hear it. Yeah. Can you hear that? I hope you can hear it. But anyway, ooh, I dropped the controller there. As you can see, this actually is a reasonable imitation of the arcade game. Those are monsters chasing me around. Those aren't ghosts flickering on and off. And the maze that I'm in is very faithful. It has a different aspect ratio from that of the arcade game, but it's essentially the same damn maze. This was considered quite remarkable in 1982. I mean, I was exaggerating at the age of 12 when I said it was almost exactly like the arcade game, but it pretty much kind of sort of is, or was. I mean, this represented such a leap forward compared to your Atari VCS or your Mattel and television, for that matter. As you can see, even with these crappy controllers, I've still got the touch. Is that something to brag about? I don't know. Oh yeah, here I come. Keep in mind, this was an era when Buckner and Garcia's record album, and they were called record albums back then. They actually came on these flat pieces of vinyl that had grooves in them. Buckner and Garcia, I don't know how much money they made. I don't know how well the record sold, but every time you turned around, everybody was listening to, on their 8-track or their radio or whatever, Buckner and Garcia's album Pac-Man Fever, which struck quite a resonant chord with the culture at large. I have to admit I owned a copy, and still do own a copy of Pac-Man Fever. I don't listen to it very often, but what really kind of sucked about Pac-Man Fever is that it was one of those kind of gimmicky concept novelty item albums, and so basically they had to come up with enough songs about video games to fill an entire record. So besides the title song Pac-Man Fever, they had Froggy's Lament, which was about the game Frogger, Hyperspace, which was about asteroids. What else was there? Come On, Do the Donkey Kong, which was a song about Donkey Kong. Mousetrap was another one, a song about the game Mousetrap. Defender, there was a song called Defender. What else was there? Hold on a second. What? Sorry, my mom's yelling from the other room for me to turn off the noise. It's only like well after midnight or so. Did I say my mom? I'm sorry. I meant to say the people upstairs. I don't live in my mother's basement. That's crazy. Where would you get such a thought? Let me just turn this down a bit.